The freight wagon rolled into Blue Ridge on a Tuesday, and Mirabelle Everly knew her carefully built world was about to crack wide open. She stood on the boardwalk outside the newspaper office, ink still wet on her fingertips from the morning edition, and watched Mercer Cutter swing down from his horse like 6 years hadn't passed since the night he rode away, and left her bleeding in more ways than one. The wind picked up, carrying dust and the scent of coming weather, and when his eyes found hers across the rutted street, she felt the old wound split fresh. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just tied his horse to the rail outside the freight office and stood there, hat brim shadowing his face, waiting for her to look away first. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. The town council had hired him to run freight operations through the winter season, secure supply lines before the hard freeze locked them all in until spring. Nobody had thought to mention it to the woman who printed every piece of news that mattered in Blue Ridge. Nobody had thought she might care that the man who broke her heart was back. Mirabelle turned on her heel and pushed through the door of her office, letting it slam harder than necessary. The bell above jangled, harsh and accusing. She had a newspaper to run, water rights to investigate, and a town slowly choking under the grip of men who thought they owned everything worth owning. She didn't have time for ghosts. But ghosts, it seemed, didn't care about her schedule. Mercer Cutter walked into her office 20 minutes later, filling the doorway the way he always had, all shoulders and quiet danger. He took off his hat, held it against his chest like that might soften the intrusion. It didn't. Mirabelle kept her eyes on the typeset tray in front of her, arranging letters with steady hands that betrayed nothing of the fury building in her chest. "You didn't tell me you were coming back," she said. Her voice came out flat, controlled. She'd practiced that tone for years. "Didn't think you'd want to know," Mercer said. His voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher around the edges. The years hadn't been kind to either of them. She looked up then, met his eyes straight on. "You're right. I didn't." Something flickered across his face, too fast to name. He stepped further into the office, closed the door behind him. The sound of it shutting felt too final, too much like being trapped. Mirabelle stood, putting the worktable between them like a barricade. "I'm here on business," he said. "Town council hired me to manage freight through winter. I'll be running supply lines, coordinating with the ranchers, making sure everyone gets what they need before the passes close." "How civic-minded of you." His jaw tightened. "I heard you've been making enemies. Writing pieces about water rights, land deeds that don't quite add up. That's dangerous talk in a town like this." "This is my town," Mirabelle said. "I grew up here. I built this newspaper from nothing. I'm not going to sit quiet while men like Harlan Voss steal land from families who've worked it for 20 years. Mercer took another step forward. She held her ground. "Voss owns half the freight contracts in this territory. You go after him in print, you're not just making an enemy, you're painting a target on your back. Then it's a good thing I know how to shoot." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Almost. That's new." "A lot of things are new," she said. 6 years is a long time. He set his hat on the edge of her desk, a gesture that felt too familiar, too much like he planned to stay. "Look, I know you don't want me here, but I owe you the truth. Voss didn't just hire me for freight. He wants me to keep an eye on you." Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. She kept her face smooth, gave him nothing. "And are you? Keeping an eye on me?" I told him I'd do my job. I didn't say which job I meant. "That's not an answer." Mercer leaned forward, bracing his hands on the table. It's the only answer you're getting right now. You need to be careful, Mirabelle. Voss has the sheriff in his pocket, half the town council taking his money. If you push too hard, he'll push back. And I can't protect you if you won't let me close enough to try. The word protect hit her like a slap. She laughed, sharp and bitter. You didn't protect me 6 years ago. Why would I trust you to start now? His face went hard, all the warmth draining out of it. That's fair. But circumstances have changed. Have they? Because from where I'm standing, you're still working for men who think they can buy and sell this town. You're still choosing the easy paycheck over doing what's right. He straightened, picked up his hat. If you think anything about my life has been easy, you don't know me at all. I don't, she said. I thought I did once. I was wrong. Mercer held her gaze for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then he turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind him with a soft click that felt worse than a slam. Mirabelle sank into her chair, hands shaking now that he was gone. She pressed her palms flat against the table, forced herself to breathe. She had work to do, an investigation to finish, a story to print that would blow the lid off Harlan Voss's land scheme and give the ranchers a fighting chance to keep their water rights. She couldn't afford to think about Mercer Cutter. Couldn't afford to remember the way he used to look at her, like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting under his feet. Couldn't afford to wonder why he'd really come back, or what he meant when he said circumstances had changed. The wind rattled the windows, and the first drops of rain began to fall. By Thursday, the rain had turned to a dust storm that choked the sky brown and sent everyone indoors. Mirabelle worked by lamplight, door and windows sealed tight, reviewing land deeds she'd borrowed from the county clerk. The numbers didn't add up. Parcels that should have stayed with the original homesteaders had somehow transferred to Voss's name. Signatures that looked rushed and frightened. Dates that clustered around the same 3-month period 2 years ago. She was building a case. Slowly, carefully, with the kind of documentation that couldn't be dismissed as rumor or spite. But she needed one more piece. She needed someone who'd been there. Someone who'd seen Voss's men pressure families into signing over their land for a fraction of what it was worth. The knock on her door came just after noon. She wasn't expecting anyone. Most of the town was hunkered down, waiting for the storm to blow through. She tucked the deeds under a stack of old newspapers and crossed to the door, one hand on the small revolver she kept in her skirt pocket. "It's me," Mercer's voice called through the wood. "Open up." She hesitated, then slid the bolt and pulled the door open just wide enough to see him. He stood on the boardwalk, dust coating his shoulders and hat, eyes narrowed against the wind. Behind him, the street was a wall of brown haze. "What do you want?" "Your roof's coming loose. Southwest corner. If it tears off in this wind, you'll lose half your office." She glanced up instinctively, though she couldn't see anything from inside. "How do you know?" "I was checking the freight office. Saw it from across the street. You need to get up there and nail it down before it's too late." Mirabelle looked at the ceiling, then back at Mercer. "I can handle it myself." "Not in this wind, you can't. You need a second pair of hands, and I'm the only one stupid enough to be out here." He was right, and she hated that he was right. She grabbed her shawl and a hammer from the workbench, shoved a handful of nails into her pocket. "Fine, but you're holding the ladder." They went out into the storm together, and the wind hit like a living thing, shoving and clawing. Mirabel tied her shawl tight across her face, climbed the ladder with Mercer bracing it from below. The roof was worse than she'd thought. 3 boards had pulled loose, flapping in the wind like broken wings. If they tore free, the whole corner section would go. She straddled the peak, hammer in one hand, nails clenched between her teeth. Mercer climbed up after her, moving with the easy balance of a man who'd spent years working high places. He didn't ask permission, just took position on the loose section and started pulling the boards back into place. "Hold it steady," she shouted over the wind. He nodded, braced his weight against the wood. She drove the first nail home, then the second. Her hands were numb, eyes watering from the dust. The wind gusted hard, and the whole roof shuddered. Mercer's hand shot out, caught her wrist, held her steady until the gust passed. They worked in silence, nailing down board after board. It took 20 minutes, maybe more. Time stretched strange in the storm. Everything narrowed down to wind and wood, and the man beside her, solid and unshakable. When the last nail was driven, she sat back, breathing hard, and he was right there, close enough that she could see the dust caught in his beard, the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 6 years ago. "Thank you," she said. The words came out rough, grudging. "You're welcome." They climbed down together, and when they were back inside, door bolted against the storm, Mirabel realized she was shaking. Not from cold. From something else. Something she didn't want to name. Mercer pulled the bandana down from his face, shook the dust from his hat. "You should get out of those wet things," he said. "Storm's not letting up anytime soon." She looked down, realized her dress was soaked through at the hem, shawl caked with mud. "I'll be fine." Mirabel. The way he said her name, low and careful, made her look up. His eyes were steady, concerned, and for a moment she saw the man she used to know, the one who'd stayed up all night with her when her father died, who'd held her while she cried and promised he'd never leave. The man who left anyway. She turned away, busied herself with hanging up her shawl. "You should go. I have work to do. I'm not leaving you alone in this. Storm's bad and getting worse. If something happens, if the building takes damage, you need someone here." I said I'm fine. He crossed the room, stood close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him, smell the dust and rain, and something underneath that was just him. Familiar and dangerous. "You always say you're fine. You said it 6 years ago when your father's debt collectors came through. You said it when the bank tried to foreclose on this building. You say it like if you repeat it enough times, it'll be true." She spun to face him, anger flaring hot and welcome. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to walk back into my life and act like you know me, like you have any right to care what happens to me. I never stopped caring. You left. I had to. Why?" She threw the word at him like a weapon. "Why did you have to leave? Because things got hard? Because I needed you and you couldn't handle it?" His face went dark, jaw working. "You think I wanted to leave? You think that was easy for me? I don't know what it was for you, because you didn't tell me. You just disappeared one night, and the next thing I heard, you were 3 territories away, working freight for men I wouldn't trust to water my horse." Mercer took a step back, hands curling into fists at his sides. "I left, because if I stayed, I was going to get you killed." The words hung between them, stark and raw. Mirabelle stared at him, heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" He turned away, braced his hands against the wall. "My brother. Did you ever wonder why I never talked about him? Why I told everyone I was an only child?" She had wondered. In the early days, when they'd first started courting, she'd asked once. He'd shut down so completely, so fast, that she'd never brought it up again. I figured it wasn't my business. His name was Owen. He rode with a gang out of Colorado. Robbed trains, banks, stagecoaches. Got himself a reputation as one of the fastest guns in the territory. And when the law finally caught up to him, he dragged me into it. Told them I was part of it, that I'd helped plan the jobs, hidden the money. Mirabelle's breath caught. "Were you?" "No." But that didn't matter. They had Owen's word, and half the territory wanted someone to hang for what that gang did. So I ran. Came here, started over, thought maybe I could build a life that had nothing to do with any of it. And then, Mirabelle's voice came out small, quieter than she meant. And then, Owen broke out of prison, came looking for me, said he needed my help, that the gang was planning one more job, and if I didn't cooperate, he'd make sure everyone in Blue Ridge knew exactly who I was. I told him no. He got violent. I fought him off, but he swore he'd come back. Swore he'd hurt anyone I cared about until I gave him what he wanted. Mercer turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her chest ache. I couldn't let him hurt you. So I left. Figured if I wasn't here, if there was nothing tying me to this place, he'd leave you alone. Did he? I don't know. I never heard from him again. Found out 2 years later he was dead. Shot by a bounty hunter outside Dodge City. Mirabelle pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to process it all. You should have told me. I couldn't. If the law found out I was Owen Cutter's brother, they'd have arrested me on suspicion. I'd have been tried, probably hanged. And anyone close to me would have been dragged into it too. I couldn't do that to you. So you just left me to think you didn't care. That I wasn't worth staying for. He crossed to her in 2 strides, caught her shoulders gently. You were the only thing that ever made me want to stay. Leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. The storm rattled the windows, and Mirabelle felt something shift inside her. Old anger cracking open to let in something more complicated, more painful. She wanted to stay furious with him. It was safer that way. But the truth sat between them now, raw and undeniable, and she couldn't unhear it. She pulled away, wrapped her arms around herself. Why come back now? Because Owen's gang is gone. The law stopped looking for me 3 years ago. And because I heard you were in trouble, taking on men who don't care about truth or justice, and I couldn't stay away anymore. Even though I hate you? Do you? She looked at him. Really looked. And realized she didn't know what she felt anymore. Yes. No. I don't know. You hurt me, Mercer. You made me believe we had a future, and then you took it away without even giving me a choice. I know. And I'm sorry. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again. Not unless you tell me to. Before she could answer, the storm surged hard, and something crashed against the side of the building. They both froze. Mercer moved to the window, peered out through the gap in the shutters. The freight office roof just collapsed. Half the streets flooding. Mirabelle's mind raced. The printing press, the paper stock. If water got into the office, she'd lose everything. We need to move things off the floor. Get everything up high. They worked fast, hauling boxes of paper onto the worktable, lifting the typeset trays onto shelves. Mercer dragged the heavy rolls of newsprint to the back corner, stacking them on crates. The water started seeping under the door, a slow creep that turned the floorboards dark. "It's not stopping," Mirabelle said. Her voice shook, just a little. "We'll hold it off." Mercer grabbed a stack of old newspapers, shoved them against the base of the door to slow the water. "Find me more cloth. Anything absorbent." She tore through her supplies, found burlap sacks and old rags. They stuffed them into every gap, working side by side in the dim lamplight. The water kept coming, but slower now, more manageable. Outside, the storm roared on, relentless. Hours passed. The storm didn't let up. Mirabelle sat on the worktable, exhausted, watching Mercer check the barricades again. He moved with quiet efficiency, someone who knew how to handle crisis without panicking. She'd forgotten that about him, forgotten how steady he could be when everything around them was falling apart. "You should rest," she said. "We've done all we can." He came back to where she sat, leaned against the table beside her. "You should take your own advice. I'm too tired to argue with you. First time, for everything." She almost smiled. Almost. The lamplight flickered, and in the shifting shadows, he looked younger, more like the man she remembered. She studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar. "I'm engaged," she said suddenly. The words came out flat, factual. Mercer went very still. "What?" "Thomas Brennan. He owns the land office. He proposed 2 months ago. I haven't given him an answer yet, but the whole town expects me to say yes." "Do you love him?" She looked away. "He's kind, stable. He'll give me a good life." "That's not what I asked." "No," she said quietly. "I don't love him." "But love didn't keep you here 6 years ago. And it won't keep the bank from foreclosing if I can't pay my debts. Thomas can offer me security. That's worth something." Mercer turned to face her, and his hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw, tilting her face toward his. "Security's not the same as happiness." Her breath caught. "Maybe not. But at least it won't break my heart." Mirabelle. The way he said her name, rough and desperate, sent heat flooding through her. She knew she should pull away, knew this was a mistake, that letting him back in would only hurt worse the next time. But his hand was warm against her skin, and she was so tired of being careful, of protecting herself from something that had already happened. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to stop him. She didn't. His lips brushed hers, soft at first, questioning. Then she made a small sound in the back of her throat, and his hand slid into her hair, and the kiss deepened, fierce and hungry, and 6 years overdue. She pulled back first, breathing hard. "We can't do this." "Why not?" "Because you'll leave again. Because I can't survive losing you twice. Because I'm trying to build something here, and you're going to ruin everything. I'm not leaving. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." He caught her hands, held them tight. "I spent 6 years running from the only thing that ever mattered to me. I'm done running." Before she could answer, someone pounded on the door. Mirabelle's heart jumped. Mercer moved fast, positioning himself between her and the entrance. Who's there? Sheriff Doyle. Open up. Mercer shot her a look. She shook her head. The sheriff was Voss's man, through and through. If he was here in the middle of a storm, it wasn't for anything good. Mercer moved to the door, slid the bolt, opened it just wide enough to see out. Sheriff Doyle stood on the boardwalk, rain dripping from his hat, 2 deputies flanking him. We need to speak with Miss Everly. About what? Mercer's voice was flat, dangerous. That's between me and her. Step aside. Not until you tell me what this is about. The sheriff's hand moved to his gun. I said step aside. Mirabelle stepped forward, touched Mercer's arm. It's all right. Let him in. Mercer didn't move. She could feel the tension radiating off him. Violence held barely in check. She squeezed his arm. And finally, he stepped back, jaw tight. The sheriff and his deputies came inside, dripping water and authority. Miss Everly, Sheriff Doyle said, pulling a folded paper from his coat. I have a warrant for your arrest. The words hit her like a physical blow. On what charge? Theft of county property. You borrowed land deeds from the clerk's office and failed to return them. That's a crime. Mirabelle's mind raced. The deeds. She'd borrowed them legally, signed for them, had every right to review public records. This was Voss's doing. He'd found out what she was investigating and decided to stop her before she could print anything. I had permission. The clerk knows I'm researching a story. The clerk says you took them without authorization. Either way, you're coming with us. Mercer moved between them again. She's not going anywhere. Not in this storm. Not on a trumped-up charge designed to intimidate her into silence. You want to join her in a cell, Cutter? Because I can make that happen. Try it. The deputies moved, hands on their guns. Mirabelle's pulse hammered in her throat. This was spinning out of control too fast. She touched Mercer's shoulder, felt the coiled tension in his muscles. Don't. It's not worth it. Like hell it's not. She stepped around him, faced the sheriff directly. I'll go with you. But I want it on record that this arrest is illegal, that I had legal access to those documents, and that you're doing Harlan Voss's dirty work. The sheriff smiled, thin and cold. You can say whatever you want. Won't change the fact that you're spending tonight in jail. They put irons on her wrists. Mercer looked like he was going to tear the room apart, but Mirabelle caught his eyes, shook her head. Not now. Not like this. He needed to stay free. Stay outside the system long enough to help her. If they both ended up in cells, there'd be no one left to fight. The deputies led her out into the storm. She looked back once, saw Mercer standing in the doorway, lamplight behind him, fists clenched at his sides. Then the rain swallowed her, and she was stumbling through mud and wind, the jail growing closer with every step. The cell was small, cold, and smelled like mildew. Mirabelle sat on the narrow bunk, arms wrapped around herself, and tried to think. The deeds were still hidden in her office, but without her there to protect them, Voss's men could search the place, destroy the evidence. She needed to get word to someone she trusted, someone who could move the documents before they disappeared. But who? Half the town was too afraid of Voss to cross him. The other half was on his payroll. The hours crawled past. The storm finally broke just before dawn, leaving the town waterlogged and exhausted. Mirabelle dozed fitfully, woke to the sound of voices in the outer office. She stood, moved to the bars. Listen, you can't just demand her release, the sheriff was saying. She's been charged with a crime that doesn't exist. Mercer's voice came back, hard and furious. I spoke to the county clerk myself. He confirmed she had permission to borrow those deeds. He signed the ledger. This arrest is fraudulent. Prove it. I will. And when I do, you'll be out of a job. Careful, Cutter. You're walking a thin line. I've been walking thin lines my whole life. Doesn't scare me. Footsteps. And then Mercer was there, gripping the bars, looking at her with eyes that burned. You all right? She nodded. Did you move the deeds? Hidden. Safe. Boss's men tore apart your office last night. They didn't find anything. Relief flooded through her. Good. Thomas Brennan's outside. He's demanding to see you. Mirabelle's stomach sank. Of course he was. This was exactly the kind of scandal he'd hate. The kind that made her look reckless and dangerous. She didn't want to see him. Didn't want to have the conversation she knew was coming. But she didn't have much choice. Send him in, she said quietly. Mercer's jaw tightened. You don't have to see him. Yes, I do. He held her gaze a moment longer, then turned and walked away. A minute later, Thomas Brennan appeared, immaculate as always in his town suit and polished boots. He looked at her through the bars, face tight with disapproval. Mirabelle, this is unacceptable. I didn't do anything wrong. You borrowed legal documents to investigate a man who employs half this town. You knew it would cause trouble, and you did it anyway. Because he's stealing land from families who have no other recourse. That's not your responsibility. Yes, it is. I'm a newspaper woman. Holding powerful men accountable is exactly my responsibility. Thomas sighed, pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, folded it precisely. I can't marry a woman who's going to spend her life courting scandal. I need a wife who understands discretion, who knows how to navigate society without making enemies. Then you don't want to marry me, Mirabelle said. Because I'm never going to be that woman. I had hoped you'd grow out of this reckless phase, that you'd settle down, focus on building a respectable life. She looked at him, this man who'd offered her stability and safety, and realized she felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a quiet certainty that he was wrong about everything that mattered. I'm not in a phase, Thomas. This is who I am. Then I'm afraid I must withdraw my proposal. He said it like he was canceling a dinner engagement, polite and final. I understand. He turned to leave, paused at the door. For what it's worth, I did care for you. But I can see now that we're not suited. She watched him go, and the door closed behind him with a soft click. She waited for the sadness to come, the regret. It didn't. What she felt instead was relief, light and unexpected. Mercer returned a few minutes later, carrying a tin plate with bread and coffee. The sheriff let him bring it back. He passed it through the bars, and their fingers brushed. Thomas called off the engagement, she said. I heard. You don't look surprised. I'm not. He wanted someone safe. You've never been safe. Is that a compliment? It's the truth. She ate slowly, buying time. Mercer stayed close, leaning against the wall beside the cell, keeping watch. The easy silence between them felt familiar, grounding. After a while, she spoke again, voice low. The deeds prove Voss used intimidation to force land transfers. Families signed over parcels for a fraction of their value because his men threatened them. If I can get that story printed, the territorial judge will have to investigate. And Voss will do everything in his power to stop you. I know. Mercer was quiet for a long moment. Then, I talked to a few people this morning. Freight drivers, ranch hands, folks who owe Voss money or favors. Got them to admit they saw his men pressuring homesteaders. 2 of them are willing to go on record. Mirabelle's heart kicked up. That's huge. If we have witness statements backing up the deeds, the case is solid. There's a catch. They'll only testify if they know Voss can't retaliate. That means we need to move fast. Get the story out before he knows we have witnesses. How? I'm in jail, and even if I get out, the press is in my office, and that place is being watched. Mercer's mouth quirked into something almost like a smile. Lucky for you, I know a printer in Red Mesa. Old friend, owes me a favor. We get you out of here, ride hard, we can be there by tomorrow night. Print the story, get it distributed, before Voss even knows what hit him. Red Mesa's 3 hours away, and that's in good weather. The roads are mud from the storm. Then we better get moving. She stared at him. You're serious? Completely. How are you planning to get me out of here? The sheriff's not just going to open the door and wave goodbye. Mercer glanced over his shoulder, making sure they were alone. The county clerk is on his way with the signed ledger proving you had permission to borrow those deeds. When he shows up, the sheriff has to release you. That gives us maybe an hour's head start before Voss realizes you're free and comes after you. And then what? Then we ride like hell and hope we're fast enough. An hour later, the county clerk arrived. He was nervous, sweating despite the cold. But he had the ledger, and he had backbone enough to stand up to the sheriff's bluster. The signature was there, clear as day. Legal authorization. The sheriff's face went red, but he had no choice. He unlocked the cell, and Mirabelle walked out into the weak afternoon sunlight, feeling like she'd been holding her breath for a year. Mercer had 2 horses ready, saddled and waiting. He helped her mount, handed her a canteen and a jacket that smelled like him. They rode out of Blue Ridge at a steady trot, not fast enough to attract attention, but not slow either. Once they were clear of town, Mercer spurred his horse into a canter, and Mirabelle followed, mud flying from the hooves. The road to Red Mesa was rough, torn up by the storm. They pushed hard, stopping only to water the horses and let them blow. The sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rust and gold. Mirabelle's legs ached. Her back hurt, but she didn't complain. This was the only shot they had. Mercer kept glancing back, checking for pursuit. So far, the road behind them stayed empty, but it was only a matter of time. Tell me about the printer, Mirabelle said. They were walking the horses through a shallow creek, giving them a break. His name's Charlie Moss. Used to run a paper in Denver until he got crossways with the wrong people. Moved out here to get away from it. He's good, fast, and he doesn't ask questions. And he'll help us because he owes you a favor? Mercer hesitated. I kept him out of jail once. Long story. Everything with you is a long story. He smiled, faint and tired. Yeah. Seems to be a pattern. They made Red Mesa just after dark. The town was small, maybe a third the size of Blue Ridge, but it had a main street, and a few solid buildings. Mercer led the way to a printing shop tucked between a saloon and a boarding house. Light glowed in the windows. Charlie Moss was a stocky man with ink-stained hands and sharp eyes. He took one look at Mercer, then at Mirabelle, and nodded. "Come in. You look like trouble." "We are," Mercer said. "But it's the good kind." They spread the land deeds and witness statements on Charlie's worktable. Mirabelle wrote fast, laying out the facts in clear, hard language. Voss's intimidation tactics. The forced land transfers. The families left with nothing. The witness testimony backing up every claim. By midnight, she had the story finished. Charlie read it through, whistled low. "You know this is going to start a war, right?" "It already started," Mirabelle said. "We're just making sure the right side wins." He set the type himself, hands moving with practiced speed. Mercer and Mirabelle stood watch, taking turns at the window. The town was quiet, but quiet didn't mean safe. By 2 a.m, the first pages were rolling off the press, ink still wet. "How many copies can you run before dawn?" Mercer asked. 100. Maybe more. Charlie didn't look up from the press. "What's your distribution plan?" Marable glanced at Mercer. "We take them back to Blue Ridge. Drop copies at the church, the general store, the boarding house. Anywhere people gather. By the time Voss figures out what's happening, half the town will have read it, and the other half will want your head. Let them try." They loaded the papers into saddlebags and canvas sacks. Charlie handed Mirabelle an extra bundle. "For the territorial judge. Mail coach leaves here Tuesday morning. I'll make sure he gets a copy." "Thank you," Mirabelle said. She meant it. Charlie looked at Mercer. "You take care of her. She's got guts, and guts get you killed if you're not careful." "I plan to." They rode back through the pre-dawn cold, horses tired but steady. The sky lightened from black to deep blue to pale gray. By the time they reached Blue Ridge, the sun was just breaking over the eastern hills, spilling gold across the muddy streets. Mercer stopped at the edge of town. "We need a plan. Voss will have men watching your office. Maybe the sheriff too. Then we don't go there first. We start at the church. Sunday service is in 2 hours. We leave copies on every pew. By the time Voss realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. And after that, we face whatever comes." They slipped into the church through the back door. The building was empty, cold, smelling of old wood and candle wax. Mirabelle moved down the aisles, laying a folded newspaper on every seat. Mercer kept watch at the door. When the last copy was placed, they stepped back, surveyed their work. "This is it," Mirabelle said quietly. "No going back now." "No going back," Mercer agreed. They hit the general store next, left a stack by the counter. Then the boarding house, the saloon, the barber shop. By the time the town started stirring, the story was everywhere. People picked up the papers, started reading, and the buzz began. Low at first, then louder. Voices rising in shock and anger. Mirabelle and Mercer made their way to the newspaper office. The door had been broken in, lock smashed. Inside, the place was wrecked. Furniture overturned, papers scattered, typeset trays dumped on the floor. Voss's men had torn through looking for the deeds, and when they couldn't find them, they'd taken out their frustration on everything else. Mirabelle stood in the wreckage, chest tight. This was her life's work, her father's legacy, destroyed because she dared to tell the truth. She bent down, started picking up scattered type, hands shaking. Mercer touched her shoulder. "We'll fix it. All of it." Before she could answer, boots pounded on the boardwalk outside. They both turned, and Harlan Voss filled the doorway. He was a big man, thick through the chest and shoulders, with a face that had seen too much sun and not enough conscience. Two of his ranch hands flanked him, both armed. "You've made a serious mistake," Voss said. His voice was calm, which made it worse. "The only mistake was yours," Mirabelle said. "You thought you could steal land from hard-working families, and no one would notice." Voss smiled, cold and sharp. "I thought you'd be smart enough to keep your nose out of my business. Guess I was wrong." Mercer moved, putting himself between Voss and Mirabelle. "You need to leave." "Or what?" Voss looked him up and down, dismissive. "You going to stop me, Cutter? Last I checked, you work for me." "Not anymore." Voss's expression darkened. "Then you're both out of options. The sheriff's on his way. He'll arrest you for theft, trespassing, and anything else I tell him to charge you with. That story you printed won't mean a thing if you're locked up awaiting trial for the next 6 months. The territorial judge has a copy," Mirabelle said. "He'll investigate whether you want him to or not. Judges can be bought. Witnesses can be convinced to forget what they saw. You think you're the first person to come after me? You're not, and you won't be the last. But you will lose, because that's what happens to people who don't understand how power works." Mercer's hand moved to his gun. "You're done talking. Get out." Voss didn't move. His men shifted, hands dropping to their own weapons. The room went still, taut as a drawn bowstring. Mirabelle's pulse hammered. This was about to turn bloody, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Then the door opened wider, and people started filing in. The general store owner, the blacksmith, the woman who ran the boarding house, a rancher from outside town, his wife beside him. More and more, until the office was packed with townsfolk, all holding copies of the newspaper. "We read the story," the blacksmith said. His voice was steady, unafraid. "We know what you did, Voss." The rancher stepped forward. "You threatened my family, made us sign over water rights for nothing. We're taking it to the judge, and we're not backing down." Voss looked around, and for the first time, Mirabelle saw uncertainty flicker across his face. He'd built his power on fear and isolation, on keeping people divided and afraid. But the story had done what she'd hoped. It had shown everyone they weren't alone. "This isn't over," Voss said. But he was already backing toward the door. "Yes, it is," Mirabelle said. "You're finished in this town." He shot her a look of pure venom, then turned and walked out, his men trailing behind. The townsfolk stayed, filling the space he left, and the weight that had been pressing on Mirabelle's chest for weeks finally lifted. The next few days were a blur. The territorial judge arrived, interviewed witnesses, reviewed the deeds. Voss was arrested, charged with fraud and intimidation. The land transfers were voided. Families got their property back. The town, slowly, started to heal. Mirabelle spent every waking hour rebuilding her office. Mercer was there every day, hauling lumber, fixing broken furniture, resetting type. They worked side by side, and the easy rhythm they'd had 6 years ago came back. Stronger now, tempered by everything they'd survived. On a cold afternoon 2 weeks after the story broke, Mercer found her at the printing press, inking the type for the next edition. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked. She looked up, surprised. "Why would I leave?" "I don't know. Start fresh somewhere. Somewhere people don't know your story. This is my story. I'm not running from it." He smiled. "Good. Because I wasn't planning to let you go anywhere without me." She set down the ink roller, crossed to where he stood. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I've spent 6 years trying to be someone I'm not, working for men I didn't respect, running from a past I couldn't change. I'm done with that. I want to stay here. With you. If you'll have me?" Her heart kicked hard. "What about your freight contracts?" "I'll break them. Find other work. There's a ranch outside town looking for a foreman. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest. And if I say yes, if I let you stay, then I'll spend the rest of my life proving I won't leave again." She reached up, touched his face, felt the rough scrape of his beard against her palm. "I'm scared." "So am I. But you're staying anyway. Because you're worth being scared for." She kissed him then, slow and deep, and it felt like coming home. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. "Marry me," he said. "Not because it's practical, or because the town expects it. Marry me because I love you, and I want to build a life here with you, and I don't care how hard it gets, as long as we're facing it together." She laughed, surprised and breathless. "That might be the worst proposal I've ever heard. Is that a yes?" "Yes. It's a yes." They were married in the spring, in the same church where she left newspapers on every pew. The whole town turned out, curious and hopeful. Mirabelle wore a simple dress the color of prairie wildflowers, and Mercer stood at the front, looking nervous and impossibly handsome in a borrowed suit. The preacher spoke about second chances, about grace and forgiveness, and Mirabelle held Mercer's hand and felt something she hadn't felt in 6 years. Not just hope, certainty. This was right. This was home. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, the doors banged open. Everyone turned, and for one awful moment Mirabelle thought it was Voss, thought he'd broken out, come back to destroy everything. But it was just the wind, sweeping in with a scent of new grass and rain-washed sky. Mercer squeezed her hand, and the preacher continued. "Do you, Mercer Cutter, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold, from this day forward, in sickness and health, as long as you both shall live?" "I do." His voice was steady, certain. "And do you, Mirabelle Everly, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold, from this day forward, in sickness and health, as long as you both shall live?" She looked at Mercer, at the man who'd come back, who'd fought for her, who'd chosen her every day, even when it was hard. "I do. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Mercer pulled her close, kissed her like they had all the time in the world and he planned to use every second. The congregation cheered, and someone started clapping, and the sound filled the church like thunder. They walked out into the spring sunshine, hand in hand. The town spread out before them, familiar and hopeful. The newspaper office was rebuilt, the printing press humming. The ranches were recovering, water flowing again through channels Voss had tried to steal. The territorial judge had appointed a new sheriff, someone honest, someone who couldn't be bought. Mirabel looked at Mercer, and he looked back, and the years between them felt like nothing. Like they'd always been heading here, to this moment, to this choice. "You ready for this?" he asked. "For what?" "The rest of our lives." She smiled, fierce and bright. "I've been ready since the day you rode back into town." They started walking, down the church steps, across the muddy street, toward the newspaper office and the home they'd built together. Behind them, the church doors closed, and the bell rang out clear and joyful across the prairie. The sound carried on the wind, over the town and out across the open land, promising something new, something earned, something that would last. 3 months later, Mirabel stood in front of the printing press, typesetting the latest edition. The headline read, "New Water Rights Law Passes Territorial Legislature." It was good news, the kind she'd fought for, the kind that mattered. Mercer came in through the back door, carrying lumber. He was building an addition to the office, a room where they could store paper and supplies without everything getting cramped. He'd taken the ranch foreman job, but he still found time to help her every day, still made sure she wasn't carrying the weight alone. "How's it going?" he asked, setting down the wood. "Good. This is going to be a strong issue." He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. "You say that about every issue, because it's true every time." He laughed, soft and warm against her ear. She leaned back into him, let herself feel the solid presence of him, the way he fit against her like he'd always belonged there. Outside, the town moved through its daily rhythms. Freight wagons rolled down the street. The blacksmith's hammer rang clear. Voices called greetings, friendly and familiar. Blue Ridge was healing, growing, becoming the kind of place people wanted to stay. And Mirabel, standing in her rebuilt office with her husband's arms around her, and the truth inked onto the page in front of her, knew she'd made the right choice. Not the safe one, not the easy one, but the one that had led her here, to this life, to this love, to this hard-won happiness that felt more real than anything she'd ever known. "I love you," she said quietly. Mercer tightened his arms around her. "I love you too." The years that followed weren't always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, new conflicts and old debts. But they faced it all together, side by side, and the bond between them only grew stronger. They built the kind of life that couldn't be shaken by scandal or fear, the kind that was rooted deep in trust and truth and the daily choice to keep choosing each other. Mirabel kept printing the paper, holding power accountable, giving voice to those who had none. Mercer ran the ranch, built a reputation as a fair and honest foreman, the kind of man people trusted. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the town had gone to sleep, they'd sit together on the porch of the home they'd built, watching the sun set over the prairie, and know that they'd earned every moment of the peace they'd found. The past didn't disappear. Owen's shadow still lingered sometimes, and the wound of those lost years never fully healed. But it didn't have to. They'd learned that love wasn't about erasing the pain. It was about carrying it together, about trusting that the person beside you would stay even when the road got rough. And Mercer Cutter, the freight foreman with the outlaw brother and the dangerous past, never left again. He stayed through every storm and every joy, through the hard seasons and the good ones. Because he'd learned something Mirabelle had always known. That home wasn't a place. It was a person, and she was his.